According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, 1,574,000 people were incarcerated in the year 2013 total. 1.57 is a large number, an expensive number at that. According to Vera Institute of Justice, $39 billion of our taxpayer money was spent on prisons alone in 2010. I started researching this topic a few weeks ago after I saw the article about President Obama granting clemency to about 46 people. He's actually the first president to do that since the 1960s. It feels like the only things that get pardoned nowadays are the turkeys every Thanksgiving in the White House. Today I'll be speaking on the subject of mandatory minimums, why it's a problem and what caused this, and the solutions for this ordeal. Mandatory minimum sentencing laws are laws that require judges to sentence certain crimes with a minimum number of years without even looking at the context and stuff like that. Mandatory minimums take away judges' ability to punish based on the circumstances and the context of the crime. Now take for instance a story, his name is Douglas Lindsay. He served 4 years in the Army. He then got out, was hired as a counselor for disabled kids, and in 1996 he was implicated in a 14-person crack conspiracy. As a first-time nonviolent offender, he was found guilty, life in prison without the possibility of parole. No guns were involved, and no drugs were ever found on Douglas. The 13 other people said he ran the crack house, but the crack house belonged to his aunt, which had a long history of crack addiction. Now I'm going to point you over to a graphic here. So this is a line graph illustrating the U.S. state and federal prison populations from 1925 to 2012. As you can see here, we're about 1.5 thousand people here, and then as we go, you can kind of see the exponential growth goes really high around the mid-80s. Now, many are wondering, why did it go up in the mid-80s? What happened in the 80s that caused an all of a sudden boom in prison population? And I'll tell you. In the 1980s, the United States was gripped in a national drug hysteria. The creation of crack cocaine and a number of other drugs were crippling the nation. And a lot of new mandatory minimum laws were passed by Congress. Harsher mandatory minimum laws like the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986 and the Armed Career Criminal Act of 1984 were passed, both acts calling for longer sentencing for crimes, especially drug-related ones. According to an article published by the usnews.com, prison population has grown about 800% since these laws were passed in the 80s. Now that's an alarming rate. But there have been a lot of reform acts going through the Senate as we speak, such as the Justice Safety Valve Act of 2013, as well as the Smarter Sentencing Act of 2013. These laws will, if enacted, will revise the current mandatory minimum sentencing laws. According to an article written by Evan Bernick, published by the Heritage Foundation in February of 2014, each bill would grant district courts greater discretion to depart downward from a mandatory minimum sentence that current laws allow today. Now, don't get me wrong, I do think if you commit a crime or felony, you should have to pay. I'm not saying that criminals shouldn't have to pay for what they've done. All I'm saying is, as the number one country for prison population in the whole world, we should take a step back and really look at how long we keep people locked up. Today I talked about how mandatory minimum laws, how they're affecting our society, how they are caused by the laws that were passed in the 80s, And lastly, I spoke about how many solutions there are to combat these mandatory minimum sentencing laws. I encourage all of you to go to familiesagainstmandatoryminimums.org. It's a really cool website. They have opportunities to donate to their cause. There's fundraising opportunities, and there's even ways to give gifts to inmates and stuff like that. If donating isn't your forte, I encourage you guys to just go home, spread the word, talk to your friends and family about it, what you learned today. Do your own research. Even something as simple as a like on Facebook or a follow on Twitter could help spread the word on mandatory minimum sentence for you.